This episode was recorded before the assassination attempt on Trump.
With the manifest, egregious, unavoidable, obvious evidence of Joe Biden's utter incapacity in front of us 2 weeks ago, that was the moment.
Hello and welcome to the More Freedom Foundation podcast. I'm Maria McElhone, in charge of podcasting, and in charge of politics is Robert Morris. How are you this week, Robert?
Well, Rory, I'll be honest. Without any preamble, I'm pissed. I am angry.
What could possibly be going wrong in America right now?
The U.S. presidential election has gone from terribly boring and everybody's dispirited and don't want to pay attention to terribly chaotic and nightmarish. And of course, nobody wants to pay any attention. It is that remains to be remains the case. I've been saying since. For a year, maybe 2 years now, that as long as Joe Biden doesn't drool on himself during the debate, he's likely to win the election. We had the debate on June 27th, and I guess Biden didn't physically drool on himself, but it was pretty much the worst result imaginable.
Has anything happened when you're looking at all this information and you've just sort of stepped back and went, oh my God? Because I remember listening to the Irish Times podcast, and the woman on it basically says, I don't watch horror films, and watching this felt like one. And it was only then you're like, they're fairly neutral, and they're just like, this was horrific, this debate.
Oh, it was visceral. The patrons convinced me, one patron in particular, convinced me to watch the debate live and sort of broadcast it on the patrons only Discord server. Wow, was that a painful experience? But I'm actually kind of grateful for that experience, because otherwise I simply wouldn't have watched the debate, because, I get very little value out of presidential debates. This was a presidential debate that provided value. I saw someone suggest that night that actually this is one of two most historic debates, televised debates in U.S. history. The first being Nixon versus Kennedy back in 1960, which sort of set the format. People who listened to the debate on radio thought Nixon had won, but Kennedy was prepared for the new television age and Nixon was not. He appeared sweaty, he appeared unshaven, and he lost. This is actually Biden's performance was much, much, much worse than Richard Nixon's back in 1960.
Do you think Biden is prepared for any age? Because it's not like hearing it sounds good and seeing it sounds bad. Like if it's on TikTok, it's on the radio, it's on a podcast, it all sounds horrendous, and he has a very gormless look about himself now. Even when Trump is talking, I'm just transfixed by Biden.
Yeah. I remember watching that debate. There were some moments where he'd have this sort of smirk on him, and that was sort of weird and artificial looking, but God, was it so much better than the way he looked during most of it, which was just sort of a deer in headlights. I think he was perhaps meaning to convey indignation or something like that, but he really just conveyed Grandpa doesn't know where he is or what he's doing. And that's the main takeaway from anybody who watched that debate, honestly.
Could you tell me why it seems like American elections seem to take forever? Like the UK just started one and had it finished within 2 months. France had 2 in 2 months, and Iran had a president get killed and they elected one. They're not the most democratic country in the world, but yet America feels like this has been going for 3 years.
It's an array of bad decisions. I think probably it comes out of just how dispersed power is in the United States. There's just so many separate power centers that have acted over the course of, I think, about a century to just sort of make the race longer and longer and longer and longer. Primaries became much more important in the aftermath of Watergate. Both the Republican and Democratic parties in different ways made the primary process more binding than it used to be. No longer could a bunch of machine party bosses in smoke-filled rooms choose the candidate. I mean, that was still like the case or at least was more the case as late as the 1960s. The conventions, really in my lifetime, conventions have just been theater. They haven't really mattered much since the 1960s, since those reforms. But it used to be that the candidate was chosen at the convention, and certainly in the 1968 Democratic Convention, which famously turned very violent. Also, amusingly, the Democratic Convention this August is in Chicago again. There were real decisions being made at conventions. It used to be that you had the spring of the year of the election, the parties, the candidates in the parties went up against each other, and then you had the summer convention, and then you had the election. Since primaries became much, much more important, I think there was a bit of a sort of arms race between not particularly important states like Iowa and New Hampshire to sort of go further and further and further into the year before the November election. And that's sort of become the traditional starting point of these elections. I think that's part of it. I think part of it is the fact that the media figured out that the presidential election is the only election that most of the American public cares about. So they want to start that selection process as early as possible. So you have networks running debates between all these folks even before the already ridiculously early primary dates in Iowa and New Hampshire. So it's all of these actors working to make campaigns eternal. Obviously, for the wealthy people who do most of the funding of politicians and campaigns, it's in their interest that candidates spend more and more of their time on the hook and trying to develop money for a longer and longer process. So, I mean, there's an array of factors, but there's no disputing your central point that the entire U.S. election process is laughably, absurdly long.
Is there any financial caps on these? Because most countries seem to have, like, you can spend so much on an election and so much in each constituency, fighting for that seat.
That is an evolving and cursed topic that it's sort of like, gee, Rob, what's going on at the border? Or, gee, Rob, what do you think about how environmental subsidies are working across three, multi-hundred pieces of legislation? So that's like I'd have to spend a month diving into those questions. What I can say now is that it is cursedly complex, but it is cursedly complex in the way that it makes it easy to find a way to prosecute a little guy who attempts to participate in elections.
So would these be like independents and third parties?
No, so it's donors. So essentially, it's actually very easy to fall afoul as an individual donor of these restrictions. However, if you're a very wealthy person with connections to political consultants, good legal advice, whatnot, you can essentially give unlimited amounts because we've got a very weird multi-tier system. As an individual, as Robert Morris, I am barred. I don't know what the actual $2,300, I think, is the most that I can give to any individual candidate. Which in the it's a lot of money, of course.
Yeah.
But when you're factoring in how much a television ad costs, which is where most of this money goes, it doesn't seem like that much money. And that's the individual contribution. And absolutely, there's a role for bundlers, for people who do the logistical work of finding people who are capable of giving $2,300 to multiple candidates. That's important. That's part of the game here. But also due to recent and longer-standing campaign finance legislation, there are these things called political action committees to which people can give essentially unlimited amounts of money. We talked, I think, in a recent episode about Donald Trump, about how Tim Mellon, a scion of robber barons, great-grandson of somebody who actually did something with their lives, gave $50 million to a super PAC. And super PACs, I believe, I was trying to brush up on the definitions of this, spent perhaps too much time trying to brush up on the definitions of this morning. Super PACs are a kind of PAC that you can give an unlimited amount of money to because officially they're not officially connected to the candidate. They're just advocating for an issue. Though obviously this particular super PAC is going to be advocating for Donald Trump sorts of issues, rabble-rousing around migration. They can't say vote
Are
for
they
Donald
nearly like a think tank?
I mean, what any of these things actually are have very deep legal definitions that I wouldn't presume to actually talk about. I think that the way that U.S. nonprofits, or NGOs as they call them in Europe, non-governmental organizations, are organized are very complex and multifarious. You'll have, a 501c3 organization is distinct from a 501c9 organization, but they could be in the same office as long as you've got those two separate legal entities. And is there a PAC involved? Well, as long as it's on the next floor. That's not actually what the rules are, but it is complex and absurd. And that's why it's actually quite easy for, say, there's like a new political movement that gets a lot of money from a lot of people who might have resources but aren't familiar with the system, like say the Tea Party a number of years back or whatnot. You can have a lot of people falling afoul of these regulations because they're incredibly complicated. But if you've got the right lawyers, as all of the wealthy establishment people in the United States do, certainly as all the corporations do, you can give essentially unlimited amounts of money. So it's quite a mess.
Because I've heard basically there's some politicians that all they do is once one election cycle is over, they just start all over again. They're just essentially campaigning all the time.
Oh, that's most people in the U.S. Congress.
Wow.
Senators are a little different, especially because more and more of them are just plutocrats. Like you kind of have to be. There are exceptions, but you kind of have to be some kind of decimillionaire at least to be in the U.S. Senate. The representatives, it just sounds like the worst job in the world. You spend most of your time hitting people up for money. Whereas Biden or Trump doesn't need to be on the horn trying to get those little $2,500 donations. If you're from the 5th District of California or something, then it really is worth your while to call up every lawyer in your jurisdiction and see if they've got $2,500 to contribute. And that's the kind of there's like actual call centers for these representatives. They can finish, trying to do their job at Congress, for 3 or 4 hours and then walk across the street or to like literal call centers where they just sort of sit down and do fundraising calls. It's incredibly grim, and that's what makes candidates like, I don't think there are any on the right side, but certainly candidates like AOC more interesting because they have enough individual donors, enough of a popular profile that they don't actually have to do that work. They actually can do the people's work and can actually pay attention in Congress. AOC, I think, is probably on a lot of metrics just objectively smarter than a lot of people in Congress, but she always appears more prepared because she has time to actually dive into the issues, which most Congress people do not.
Okay, interesting.
But beyond the more general questions, I would like to just steer it briefly, at least, back to Joe Biden's horrific performance.
Has he officially been chosen yet?
So, that's the thing is, no, not officially. The official choosing happens at the Democratic National Convention, which takes place August 19th through the 22nd in Chicago.
But are these usually pre-scripted? Like, there isn't really going to be much debate or a shock with these normally. It's just the person you've heard of is usually going to win.
There hasn't been any real tension at a convention since the 1960s. I don't believe. Maybe there was in the 1970s or something along those lines. But it's important that this was actually seen as a democratic reform, not like small d democratic, like towards democracy. And I think they're actually right that it was. And I think we've seen a lot of pushback over the past months and years, really, because Donald Trump is also an example of, oops, this more democratic process isn't working out so well for us. In the time before the post-Watergate reforms, there's no way that Donald Trump would have ever been a candidate.
Is that because he hadn't any experience beforehand?
No, it's because he simply wouldn't have had the required buy-in from party elites, party hacks is a term that you'd use. It used to be that the conventions were where the political bosses of every state, county, and jurisdiction in the country came to meet. those people don't really exist so much anymore. There's been a general evisceration of the power and significance of political parties in this country. And the problem that the Republican Party has been dealing with for 9 years now, and the problem that, honestly, I guess it's becoming very apparent that actually the Democrats have been dealing with, I'd say probably since Obama, but all of a sudden over the past couple weeks, it is very much a Democratic problem as well, is that the parties just don't matter anymore. It's who's the president or who. Right, there aren't party leaders. There isn't party leadership in the United Kingdom, in France, in most of the rest of the developed world. There are still political parties that operate within legal structures, but with like real power over who the person in charge is.
Well, usually, quite often, it'll be the members. So if you just to support a political party, you'll get to choose. You'll get a ballot, and then say, "Oh, I like Rob, the look of Rob," and depending on that, that's who will win.
Well, we have that, but we do it in like in an incredibly convoluted way, where it's not like one big vote up and down, or like, oh wow, like we don't like how, say, Jeremy Corbyn is doing. Let's have another vote up and down, and he's out. No, it's this really complicated primary system over the past year. I guess it's since January. I think I'm not sure when the first primary was. Probably January, February. So each state, under its own rules, picks its own delegates and allots them over the. So it's consciously complicated and ridiculous. And before the Watergate.
Sorry, I know a lot of American politics was sort of based around, because America is, quite an old country, so it was based around like horse and cart, and things would have to take a while. Is it basically just an old legacy that it's a bit clunky in modern context, or is this something, as you say, came from Watergate and is relatively recent?
Well, there's both. There are aspects of this that are clunky, and it used to be that this clunky structure helped all the local political forces, machine bosses, what have you. After Watergate, all of this whole clunky system became much more democratic, which I think is a good thing. And I think that a lot of the nostalgia in recent years for, it would be better if the parties could do the picking or what have you. I think that's a little misplaced. I don't think that the problem is the democratic reforms. I think the problem is that we have, through other means, through a variety of reforms and choices and just general societal and political choices, have utterly eviscerated political parties and have made it so that they aren't actually any political system. Obviously, more famously in communist countries, you've got the lines between the state and the party are hard to disentangle. But in any political system, the United Kingdom has opted for much stronger parties. Every other really developed country has opted for much stronger parties than we have in the United States. In the United States, they're all just sort of personality cults. And generally, up until 2016, the Democratic Party tended to opt for like more reasonable, saner folks. But really, like Hillary Clinton was a terrible choice of a sort of out-of-control gerontocracy. And now, once again, Joseph Biden is a terrible choice of an out-of-control gerontocracy.
Wasn't Bernie Sanders considered more popular than her, but because she was sort of more popular within the party, she just got given it?
That's a really contentious question.
Yeah.
I think that I think you could probably make a better case that Bernie was robbed in 2020 than you can make in 2016.
Okay.
I think probably a lot of folks legitimately did want Hillary Clinton. But the choice, I mean, honestly, and this is something that Joe Biden is thinking about right now that is significant, was the choice made by Barack Obama because he was the president and he got to call the shots because there are no other power centers in the party any longer. They essentially told Joe Biden he couldn't run because it was Hillary's time. And Joe Biden would have very likely trounced Donald Trump in 2016. He should have run then. In 2020, people were telling him not to run. He did run. He did win. Not sure that was the best thing for the country because I think probably any Democrat could have run and won against Donald Trump in 2020.
According to him, there's 50 currently.
Yes, he had pointed that out. It was at the end of that the Jon Stewart thing, the Daily Show. That was very, very clever. So he's convinced himself that he should have run in 2016. It would have been better for the country. That's true. He's convinced himself that he made the right choice against the naysayers to run in 2020. That's debatable. And now he's convinced himself that he's the only one who can save the country. He's basically Erdogan. He's basically some superannuated strongman who's convinced himself that there's nothing good for the country other than him being there. And it's becoming clearer and clearer as the days wear on that he's totally wrong. And really any other Democrat could beat Donald Trump at this point. And he cannot.
One thing I noticed about the debate was quite often, I've heard some people saying he was sort of prepped too long, as in the sense that the answer was too long. It feels like Joe's sort of good with sort of a bit of a debate and with a quick answer. But it was like he would start off okay, and it was like every 5 seconds you were just like, oh no. It would just constantly get worse.
I said, will you denounce the Proud Boys? He said, no, I'll tell them to stand by. The idea he's refusing, will you denounce these guys? Will you denounce the people we're talking about now?
Yeah, well, that's like my Turkish. Like Joe Biden is now speaking English as a second language.
Oh.
I'm great. I'm great I'm great with Turkish if it's 3 words, if it's a short sentence. And that's how Joe Biden is on the debate.
Because it felt like he would come up with a good point, because I think they're basically trying to say, oh, Joe has had more immigration, but I don't think that's true. I think Trump had more. So Joe hit him with that. But because he kind of then rambled on about something else, Trump could just went, I didn't understand what he said. So he just didn't have to answer the questions that he didn't like.
Coming across the border illegally, that's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either. Look.
So he was clearly heavily coached, and there were multiple periods where he was delivering a kind of hackneyed, kind of standard, but effective and accurate talking point, and he would just trail off. I remember one very specifically where what he was supposed to say was, we passed, draconian, very severe immigration reform. They negotiated it with the Republicans, Democrats, and then the Republicans voted it down. That's a legitimate, outrageous thing that happened. The Biden administration negotiated with the Republican hardliners, put together, agreed to do a bunch of nasty stuff by the lights of most progressives, most people who pay attention to the immigration question from the left. The left was outraged. And then Donald Trump told the Republicans to vote against it because he didn't want to settle the issue before the election. That's a thing that happened. That's a thing that Joe Biden was supposed to say. And he got out the first part of it. He was like, we put in some of the most sweeping immigration reform, would have solved all of these problems. He got that far. And instead of going to, and the Republicans voted it down, which would have killed and was a great point, he just trailed off. He was like, we did an immigration reform and he's speaking English as a second language. And I think this gets to my rage here. It's obvious that this man is incapable of performing basic things. Even the excuses that they were trotting out made it
clear. The jet lag?
Yeah, the jet lag.
From 2 weeks ago?
Yes, exactly. Oh, I was in Europe for a while, and it was literally 12 days ago that you arrived. Oh. If you're still jet lagged as the U.S. president 2 weeks later, the other one was...
You shouldn't be U.S. president.
His people actually came out and said this. They actually were like, well, you got to understand, he's great from 10 to 4.
A lot of the apologies did remind me of like what you hear from a dictatorship or like, Vladimir Putin's people. It's like, oh no, everything's brilliant.
And it's very clear. I guess a number of people have been making this argument, I think, to cover their own ass, but perhaps there's some truth to it, that Biden has been markedly declining over the past year. That actually he was certainly back in 2020, he was in significantly better shape, even as recently as the beginning of last year, when people were sort of making this decision that we're not really going to have serious primaries. He was in better shape. But it's been clear to a lot of people for at least 6 months that this guy is not equal to the task. And I have a growing sense of rage against the people who have around Biden who have perpetrated this against
Could
us.
we claim this to be elder abuse at this point? Like the man's
Absolutely.
81 and he struggles to finish the sentence.
Absolutely. He is surrounded by family members and an array of pretty loathsome political figures who just know that without Biden, they don't have political power anymore, and they have colluded to sell a lie. They must have believed it to some extent, because
Because what's he going to be like at the end of this term? What, 85?
what's he going to be like at the end of the month, Rory? Like
It's December or is it November?
It's November, and he's, if you believe what a lot of folks are saying, I guess Matt Iglesias was one of these folks, that he's gotten markedly worse over the past year. Well, that, I mean, follow that trajectory through.
Yeah.
I mean, this
It's
is
a
how...
it gets downhill, as John Stewart
Yeah.
was saying about seeing parents decline and, elderly relatives. It does sort of go quick.
It goes slow, and then it goes fast. And just the expectation that this is going to go from fast to slow again, or maybe he's going to make a miraculous recovery. This is a man with access to the best healthcare on the planet. Endless resources.
Because we've talked about before, Jimmy Carter had a brain tumor and with experimental procedures was able to, overcome it. So, miracles have happened with ex-presidents. So he's getting the best he can, and this is it.
Yeah, this is it. And I think it must have even, as angry as I am at Jill Biden, at the family, the political folks, this must have even surprised them, because there's a level of deluding yourself that you do. If you're like, well, he's at the center of our world, you make more and more allowances, you make more and more excuses, and the excuses fell away on
But is
June
there also
27th.
a criticism for medical professionalism? Because theoretically, can a doctor not sort of say, this man isn't fit? A bit like on a ship, the only person that can overrule the captain is the medical officer. Is there not something here where they're like, this man shouldn't really be doing any sort of work?
There isn't. I don't believe there's any legislative requirements for that. I think that absolutely the president gets checkups, and there's been some scrutiny over that over the past weeks, of course. But my understanding is that the doctor that does the approvals, and this was the case during the Trump administration, is just some buddy of theirs, some longstanding friend. And I've seen this in actually my own family, where the individual in question will choose a doctor that isn't going to give them too hard a time, and then when the decline sets in.
But hasn't there also been questions recently about Parkinson's Parkinson's doctor has been visiting several times, and the answer the White House gave didn't really, because theoretically there could be other people in the White House with Parkinson's that need treatment, but they didn't basically say, no, that's not Joe Biden. It was a bit of a word salad answer.
It was a bit of a word salad answer, and I perhaps this is another doctor visit, not the Parkinson's visit. There's a lot swirling around at the moment that will be either confirmed or completely forgotten about 3 days from now when this uploads. But my understanding is that they told a pretty transparent lie about the Parkinson's guy, and then now it's coming out that he was actually seeing Biden. And I don't know. I like the fevered speculation about his personal health is frankly kind of unnecessary. Like, we saw the man is not capable of debating Donald Trump. The man is not capable of delivering easy layups about abortion, about a number of other things. Supposedly the big debunking. So Obama famously had a bad debate in 2012. He basically seemed like the impression that he gave was he wasn't really prepared for the debate. His excuse was, well, I'm busy being president. I'm not going to do the facts and figures in the prep to talk to this bonehead Romney. And that really came across, and that really, really hurt him. And as someone had pointed out, this was off of Twitter, so I don't know how the veracity of this, but I think it sounds about right, that Obama had a terrible debate and was recognized as having a terrible debate. and then spent the next week getting in front of as many large crowds as he possibly could to sort of hit his message home, acknowledge he'd had a debate problem, emphasize that he's here to do the message, and then he prepped like a rock star and did a great job in the next 2 debates. Nobody imagines that's going to happen with Biden.
Oh, he can't?
Well, Biden's been hidden. Biden has spent more time communing with Hunter Biden than he has with the Democratic congressional leadership.
But it makes sense. Like, if you were doing anything similar to that, you could just kill this man. Like, did you hear him reading out the prompts from the teleprompter?
No.
He basically, when it says, parentheses or stop for applause, all that stuff, it makes my skin crawl. It's just like, oh my God, he can't even do what's considered the easy part of public speaking, which is just reading the teleprompter. He's constantly reading the prompts within it. It's just incredibly sad.
4 more years. Pause.
Yeah, so the big comeback was Friday, July 5th, a full, 8 days later. He had been seen in public, but only very briefly for teleprompter remarks or walk across the White House lawn kind of thing. So he sat down for a big interview for 22 minutes. 22 minutes with George Stephanopoulos, who is...
So we can't have him on the podcast then?
No, I'm afraid not. For 22 minutes with George Stephanopoulos, who is a famous Democratic Party operative. So he basically sat down for softball questions with a Democrat for 22 minutes and also managed to look... I mean, he looked better than he did in the debate.
A lot of Botox.
Yeah, well, yeah, but he looked like, he because he knew the questions he was going to get. I'm not sure whether or not, Stephanopoulos actually sent him a list, but there was pretty obvious questions to be prepared for. He didn't look very good and managed to deliver sort of an all-time gaffe. When asked, well, what if you do this and you lose? As long as I give it my all, I'll be fine. This is the election that democracy depends on. Only Biden can defeat Trump. And he's like, well, gosh, as long as we all try our hardest.
Which is very children at a sports day.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think I get the thought process behind that response. It's meant to contrast with Trump. He's accepting, but that's Biden accepting the results of an election, which is actually what you're supposed to do and what Trump famously does not. But yeah, it was just famously misjudged, and he can't.
But he also says it. He's so frail when he says it. It's hard to really believe him.
Yeah, it is quite sad. I think this was Breaking Points or something like that. There was a commentator there, I can't remember who, pointed out that this is probably the second or the most consequential presidential debate in U.S. televised presidential debate in U.S. history, either after or before the Nixon-Kennedy. And I actually kind of had a thought, this might actually be the last.
You think this will be the end of them?
I'm not a doomer kind of guy or whatnot, but it's just if
well, people hated the layout of it, the fact you didn't really have a lot of time to answer questions.
Well, so there used to be a presidential debate commission, which was sort of an outside agency that would organize these sorts of things. And apparently both the Trump and Biden campaigns said, nah, we're going to make our own deal for it. So this was what Biden, this was the format that Biden asked for.
They chose? Okay.
Yeah. If we're going to continue having candidates that are just this unacceptably terrible and are so obviously so if you put them on a debate stage, then, we're just never going to have a debate again.
I just thought it was interesting with the new Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. There was basically, it's very sort of like a kind of, Britain looks up to America a lot, the big country and stuff. So there's a big Air Force One, Keir Starmer's talking to the President of America. And people were saying oh, is this to sort of help Keir's, publicity? And they're like, no, it might be the opposite. Because he is new and he has a landslide, Biden will want to sort of associate himself with a new popular person.
Certainly, Starmer, I think, had to do a call with Biden regardless, but to televise it the way that they did, and for it honestly to come across kind of crappy.
Is there anyone that you would like him replaced with that isn't just anybody?
Well, I think really anybody. But I think we're at a point now where it's a very open question whether he's going to be replaced. And the problem with how this process works is that the delegates are committed or what have you. And there's probably a mechanism. There's probably a way. It would be an absolute cluster bomb. But there's probably a way to take the Democratic nomination away from Joe Biden in August in Chicago if he wants to hold on to it. Maybe. I mean, debatably. Probably not. It would probably be a tremendous blow-up mess. What needs to happen, what should have happened on June 28th, we're now a full, 2 weeks? 2 weeks out from there. 2 weeks as of this recording, over 2 weeks when this goes up. Joe Biden needs to withdraw. That's the first thing that needs to be established. Because if Joe Biden withdraws, everything becomes a lot easier. Then we can start talking about, is Harris going to replace him, or are we going to do an open convention? What are we going to do? And I've heard good arguments, and I'm not persuaded either way, really, that maybe it would be smarter to just go with Harris, or maybe it would be better to do an open convention where basically we've still got a full month, actually, if Biden decided to give up tomorrow.
But is it possible Biden just has the name recognition that nobody else has?
You become the Democratic nominee for president, you get name recognition.
Okay.
People pay attention. You get to debate with Donald Trump. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that, and I think that's an argument that Biden is making. But what's interesting is how badly he's doing in polls against a bunch of people that nobody knows.
Yeah. Well, apparently apparently there's a thing in polls where basically like no name or nobody tends to do much better. And as soon as people start to know about you and you become, the leader of a party, suddenly then you get to know how popular you really are.
Well, I think that's. I'm not sure that's accurate. We've been in this weird position for, I guess, 3 elections running now, where people actually know a lot about the presidential candidates. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in 2016. It was very strange. I am someone who's like a politics knower or whatever, and I'd never really. I wasn't so much in my 20s, and I'd heard of Barack Obama before he ran for president, but just barely. It's very strange that we've had in 2016, 2020, and now 2024 household names where everybody already knows what they think about them, like Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. That's a very strange thing. So I think my understanding is that actually lack of name recognition means that you tend to do more poorly in polls. And I think that there'd be a pretty amazing reaction, the American public, if they were introduced to somebody who was capable of speaking the English language, and was opposed to Donald Trump. I think the reaction would be outsized positive. And my understanding, I didn't get too much into the polls mojo here, but my understanding is that already, even with the much lower name recognition, a wide array of Democratic politicians are forecast to do better against Trump than Biden would. Now, I'm not going to say categorically that if Joe Biden stays in the race, it is impossible for the Democrats to win in November. I'm not saying that, but it is much, much less likely. We need to start talking much more seriously about a second Donald Trump presidency if Joe Biden stays in the race. There is, I guess we could find a dead male hooker in Donald Trump's bed. Maybe that would make some difference.
Probably not.
I don't know. There's a world of things, but you're not going to be able to wipe away the fact that you simply cannot put Joe Biden in charge of anything. I think the calls for him to resign are overstated. I think, he can manage another 6 months, or rather the people around him can manage the next 6 months. Woodrow Wilson's wife did it. There's another example that's escaping me. It is laughable that you would expect anybody to choose this man to be in charge of anything. A man who, by the admission of his people, is only useful for 6 hours out of a day. Being president is at least a 12-hour job, and you've got to be on call for 24 hours. This is a guy who's just not there anymore.
Who do you think would be ideal to debate Donald Trump? If you just were like, I just want to make Donald Trump look as terrible as possible in the debates, who would you pick out of the Democrats?
Much of I think there's a really great case for a female candidate, not Hillary Clinton this year.
Is she still trying? Does she still think she has a chance?
Oh, I'm sure. Not publicly, but I'm sure that if enough people came together and were like, "You should give it a whirl," she'd be like, "Well, if I must." But I don't think very many people are deluded enough to call for that. I think the only reason Joe Biden was able to do so well in the midterms, and it wasn't Joe Biden, was the abortion decision, Roe v. Wade. And I think that a female candidate is uniquely suited to galvanize and bring half the country at least to the polls on the abortion issue. So Gretchen Whitmer, Kamala Harris, I'm sure there are other great female options that I'm unaware of. So yeah, I think Gretchen Whitmer or Kamala Harris would be the most likely for me. Just the probably the most atrocious thing about that debate was the way that he flubbed the Democrats' best argument. The fact that Donald Trump put some judges in power that took away the right to an abortion from many, many people, many women in this country is incredibly horrific. It is incredibly embarrassing. It's incredibly humiliating. And when Joe Biden was teed up that very easy question, like his opportunity to just hit it home, he started talking about immigrants raping people or something. Like he was just, and even when he finally got back, he was like, well, the doctor has to make the choice about the abortion. And it's like, no, man, it's the woman's right to choose. And I think that be it Kamala Harris or probably by my lights, preferably Gretchen Whitmer up there making the case for a woman's right to choose, that can hit the Democrats' main issue home and can blow Donald Trump away. But Gavin Newsom could do it. Cory Booker could do it. I could do it. Anybody could do it. It's very sad and it's very hard for people to acknowledge this, but he is a utterly incapable old man. And he's also a genocidaire. So, ditch him.
He's not old. He's elderly at this point.
So hopefully, my dear hope is that by the time this is uploaded, we're recording this on a Wednesday. It'll be coming out on Monday. There have been some serious movement here. Unfortunately, 2 weeks out from this debate, am beginning to suspect that we're just going to do Biden anyway out of inertia. And that is, it's a lot like, January 6th, January 6, 2021, Donald Trump helped to foster one of the most embarrassing days in U.S. democracy, whether you want to call it an insurrection or whatever. And my understanding is that the Congress, the Republicans specifically, because the Democrats would have been down for this, had the power to not just impeach him, but essentially bar him from ever running again. And there seemed like in the 48 hours or so after that, there was some real possibility of that happening. And then everybody just sort of sat back and was like, maybe next week. And I think with the manifest, egregious, unavoidable, obvious evidence of Joe Biden's utter incapacity in front of us 2 weeks ago, that was the moment. That was the time. And now everyone's like, well, why don't we just wait until after the interview and see how he does with the Stephanopoulos interview? And now this is recorded Wednesday, but on Thursday the 11th, he's supposedly doing his big boy interview, big boy press conference, they're calling it, where he's actually going to take multiple questions.
Is that an actual term they're using? Big boy press conference?
That's the term that's being used in the news media, and I believe some administration figures actually used. Yeah, that in and of itself is becoming a scandal. And the problem with the big boy press conference is the problem we saw with the Stephanopoulos interview, is that anybody who's looking at this objectively and from a serious sense of betrayal and rage, which all Americans should have at what was hidden from us, is like, this does not make me feel any better at all. But it was just not embarrassing enough. Like that, like his firm adherents or cowards in the Democratic Party who could step up and make a difference were just like, I don't know, he seemed okay. Hopefully there'll be this Thursday big boy press conference where he's just humiliated.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin.
And he's currently operating a NATO conference of some sort. Maybe some NATO leader will come out and be like, he's a frickin' vegetable. I hope so. But I'd say the chances are pretty high that all the NATO folks who are terrified of Donald Trump are just going to nod along. Joe Biden's the best. Give him some sort of like hostage video. Yay! Media that the Democrats will think they can use to, because most Democrats don't even think they can win anymore. They're just
really?
too terrified. Yeah, no, it's pretty clear. I can't believe I'm referencing this, but George Clooney, the big news from today is that George Clooney put out an op-ed saying that Biden should step down. I love Joe Biden.
Well, because I've heard quite often actors and stuff tend to side with the Democrats. And on this occasion, are they basically withholding funds? They're not going to give them help with campaigning and stuff?
Some donors have talked about that. Who knows what that actually means in practice. George Clooney is himself a large donor to Democratic causes, is a bundler, is politically involved, is interestingly married to a woman who is accusing Israel of genocide. So that's a interesting, a famous human rights lawyer. But that's another issue. We're just leaving aside the horrific mass murder that Joe Biden has helped to perpetrate. George Clooney had pointed out that in his op-ed has said that every Democratic politician I have spoken to, and you can assume that all of the most powerful ones are eager to talk to George Clooney, have said that they do not believe that Joe Biden can win this race against Donald Trump. Today we had polling come out from Cook Political Report. It's Dave Wasserman, I think, is the one of the main guys there, talking about a whole bunch of blue states switching from solid Dem to leaning Democrat, or toss-up states going from toss-up to leaning Republican. Like, this is not a race that Joe Biden can win. Because he could. Sorry, that was a little
still
too
within the margin of error.
It's anything can happen, but man,
I'm sure Trump's heart isn't the best.
Yeah, anything can happen. Well, no, actually, Donald Trump has a heart attack, and I think his running mate is probably going to be somebody in their 50s. Donald Trump dies, we get a Republican president.
Oh, really?
Sure.
Because no one's scared of because people are genuinely scared of Trump.
Who are you going to go through? You're going to go through J.D. Vance or the corpse. Most people will go for J.D. Vance. He had a nice Netflix thing. I mean, there's so many loathsome Republican options, but generally, the main thing that most people are going to know about whoever Donald Trump's running mate is, if Donald Trump has a heart attack, then I think the way it works is that if the candidate actually dies, the running mate gets the nomination.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not 100% about that. But no, I think that's probably the case.
Because what I was going to say is some of the reasoning to keep Biden is basically he's seen as so frail. People are like, oh, I have to vote because Donald Trump really might get in. Like, there isn't quite often the second term, it's a bit of a, they'll get it. Like Obama kind of didn't do great in a second, vote-wise in a second term. It was sort of like, he's popular enough, he'll get in. I probably don't need to vote for him this time. While I feel like with Biden, it's like, I have to vote for him because Trump really might get in.
I mean, maybe, but that's a pretty bad argument. Like desperation. Like my guy is so well. I mean, that was that's why because Joe Biden is such a bad candidate. I'm actually considering voting for him because I vote in New York, where normally if you don't like a Democratic candidate, feel free to not vote for him because he's winning anyway. But Biden is so bad that I think New York's electoral votes might be in contention.
Are you not going to go Kennedy?
No, I'm not going to go Kennedy. Mr. Brainworms, who's actually
it is very tragic when he also has a throat condition. When you hear him talk, it's very sad. All three of them are three tragic characters at this point.
Well, the extraordinary thing is someone had pointed out that we've got two of the most loathed candidates in U.S. presidential history. the only the most viable third-party option is a guy who's doubled down on all of their worst characteristics. RFK is a massive supporter of Israel and would want to murder more Palestinians. And he's also a huge anti-vaxxer, which is, one of the main concerns about Trump and his folks. So it's not a great situation, Murray.
Have you any advice for anyone listening? Duck and cover?
The country will survive, I think. I think there's a lot of, unless Trump or Biden, at this point, I'm honestly kind of worried about both of them, manages to start World War III. But the chances are still pretty good that China and Russia will be content to let us continue screwing ourselves over with whichever one of these geriatrics we put in power. What I'm more worried about is what happens in 2028 or God forbid 2032 when somebody, when we try to start putting the pieces back together. Joe Biden's thing was, America is back again, which was always quite risible. But God, who's going to have any respect for us after either one of these people being in president for another 4 years? It's nightmarish.
Biden did get in. How quickly would you want him replaced?
Immediately.
Just get anybody younger?
Well, no. At that point, it's not. It's at that point,
it's not immediate.
Kamala Harris. No, at that point, Kamala Harris becomes. And I would expect. If you believe the excuse that he was in much better shape a year ago, this is not a guy who's going to be capable of repeating the oath of office in January of 2025. So I don't think that's a want.
I forgot how long it takes for a president once they're voted in to get in. Because in the UK it was literally less than a day.
Oh wow! Oh gosh, see, Starmer's already the prime minister.
Oh yeah, he's been doing loads of stuff. It was like
that's crazy.
Sling your hook. Stammer was in that day.
Oh, and Rishi Sunak is already in California getting his kids into school.
Not yet. He's going to stay until they get a new person in charge of the Conservative Party. And then he may depart.
Be fairly quickly, I would imagine.
They still don't know whether they're going to do it slowly or quickly, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, so I think probably one of the main reasons why Kamala Harris isn't leading the charge to be replace this guy. I'm the gal on the ticket. Let's go. Is because she's pretty confident that if Biden does get elected, she'll be president regardless within a year or two. So
that's something potentially to look forward to.
Hey, she'll be under 60. That sounds amazing.
Under 60? Wow, is that allowed?
Apparently, yeah. You can totally have a president who's not in their late 70s. Shocking as that may be to hear.
I don't know. I think keep it to the 80s. They have so much more experience.
It's true. Experience with the English language.
So yes, we thank you for listening to us, and let's hope everything goes well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
The More Freedom Foundation is also available on YouTube and TikTok. Rob's Twitter is RobOLaw, and he's also written a book called Avoiding the British Empire, What It Was and How the US Can Do Better. And music provided by Kevin MacLeod.